When the news about the Weaver family hit the streets, Charlie, who had kicked Jordan and Jeffrey into living hell and helped Liam to rise up, was in the kitchen cooking lunch for his wife and in-laws. At the dining table, Jacob and Elaine were actively talking about the Weaver family. They loved to talk about such gossip, especially Elaine. She would be thrilled for the next 3 days if she knew about the misfortune that happened in another family. When Elaine mocked Jordan and Jeffrey for their misfortune, Claire chided, "Mom, don't mock others like that. It's not nice." Elaine snorted in disdain. I can ignore other people, but I won't miss a chance of mocking the Weaver family." Then she said in a sheepish tone, "Oh yes, did you know that Wendy was seemingly with Jeffrey a few days ago?" "Huh?" Claire gaped in bewilderment. "No way. Jeffrey is 30-something, isn't he? He is at least a decade older than Wendy. I don't think Wendy wants to be with him." Elaine clicked her tongue amusingly. "Ha ha ha. Do you really think Wendy is a saint? Tell you something. I heard that she had been Kenneth's lover for some time. You know Kenneth, right? Kenneth Wilson, the chairman of Modest Way Group in Eastcliff. Then it was Kenneth who passed her to Jeffrey." This time it was Jacob who was in utter shock. "What? Did you say Kenneth from Eastcliff? Wendy was his lover? No way. Kenneth is older than Chris." Elaine said, "Your mom wanted to curry favor with Kenneth so that she could get investment from him to save the company, so she instructed Wendy to sleep with Kenneth. I must say, the guy kept his promise. He invested $10 million into the company. Everyone knows about it. It's the truth." "Oh my goodness," Claire gasped. "How could Grandma do that? How could she ask Wendy to be with Kenneth just for money? How could my uncle and aunt agree to such an arrangement?" "Them?" Elaine snorted contemptuously. "I bet they were looking forward to it." Then she said in a mocking tone, "Well, the old lady had quite wishful thinking. But too bad Kenneth only invested $10 million, and that's it." Claire said, "Wilson Group's debts amount to about $30 million. The $10 million is just a drop in the bucket. I guess Grandma and the rest must be having a difficult time now." "She deserves it," Elaine growled. "Your grandma deserves every last bit of it. Don't you see how she has bullied us for so many years? I wish that they'd go bankrupt soon, and I hope to watch the old coot sleeping on the street. Only then would she realize how many mistakes she's made. Honestly, I feel relieved and at ease when I think of it." Jacob started awkwardly. "Enough. Mom might be wrong at some point, but you can't curse her like that. If they really go bankrupt and they are kicked out of the house, do you think we can turn our backs on her when she comes to us?" Elaine blurted furiously. "Are you kidding me? I don't care, of course. So what if she has to sleep on the street? I won't even care if she starves to death. Did you forget what she said and how she looked at us when she kicked us out of her family? I will never forgive her." Jacob sighed and said nothing more. He was indeed angry with his mother, but he wasn't as angry as Elaine was. Elaine smiled triumphantly and said, I can't wait to see the end of the Wilson family. When they are done for, we'll be moving into the big Thompson First Villa, and it would be like heaven and hell. Until then, I'll let them know that fortune knocks once at every man's door." She turned to Charlie and urged, "Charlie, have you been in contact with Mr. Zeke White? Ask him to urge the contractor to speed up their renovation progress. I want to move in next month." Charlie nodded and said, "Yes, Mr. White informed me that the work will be completed next month and we can move in then." Claire said, "Would it be good to move in right after the renovation is completed? Shouldn't we wait for a while for the smell of the paint and whatever to disappear first?" Elaine interjected, "It's okay. I went to see the progress with your dad the other day. They used imported non-polluting materials for the renovation containing zero formaldehyde. There was really no smell at all in the house. In fact, they installed an air purifying system in the house that replaces fresh air 24 hours a day. It is very advanced and healthy." Claire nodded without a word. She was rather indifferent and aloof about the whole idea of moving to the Thompson First Villa. But Charlie was right. They would not live on the same floor as her parents after moving into the new house. In this case, they would have more privacy and personal space, unlike now, where there was no such thing as privacy even in their own room. Moreover, she promised Lorene that she would reserve a room for her in the villa and invite her to live in. After all, it wasn't so nice for a girl to stay alone at a hotel. Charlie couldn't be bothered by the villa. He lived a great and lavish life before he was 8 and spent the rest of his childhood and adolescence in the orphanage. He was already at the stage where he was not pleased by external gains and not saddened by personal losses. At this moment, Elaine received a text message that made her smile when she glanced at it. She lifted her delightful gaze and said, "An old friend of mine is asking me to play 8 rounds of Mahjong at her place this afternoon. I won't be home for dinner." Jacob asked in surprise, 8 rounds? Won't it take about 10 hours then? Elaine rolled her eyes in annoyance and said, "So what if it's 10 hours? I even played for 2 days straight when I was young." Jacob tried a persuasive voice instead. "You said it yourself when you were young, but you're not young anymore. Sitting for long hours makes one prone to many illnesses: lumbar disc herniation, cervical problems, high blood pressure, all of which are caused by sitting for too long." Elaine waved her hand agitatedly. "Ah, shut it! I'm feeling fine, don't curse me." Claire frowned and said in a concerned tone, "Mom, I don't mind if you play Mahjong for leisure, but please, there are 2 things I want to say, so listen. 1, don't play for too long, and 2, please don't play by the rules that will make you win or lose thousands of thousands per round, okay?" "Ah, you're no fun. We're just playing to pass our time," Elaine said nonchalantly. "Besides, I'm doing this for our family. Look at your dad, who's a loser. Look at Charlie, who isn't only a loser, but also a liar who goes around deceiving people. I bet he will cause trouble to our family. And you are still in the beginning of your business and have not earned any money yet. How else can your dad and I retire leisurely? I'm depending on Mahjong to earn some side income for the family." Charlie was agitated by his mother-in-law's harsh remarks. She still mocked him once in a while and even felt that he was a big liar. In his mind, he imagined such a scene. He would slap her across the face and said, "Since you think I'm a big liar, then don't move into the villa that I've gotten from deceiving people." His mother-in-law needed to learn some lessons for herself. Since people were waiting for her, Elaine did not even bother to finish her meal. She quickly grabbed her bag before she took a cab to an older villa complex in Orris Hill, the West Garden Villa. An old friend of hers lived in the vicinity of this villa complex. The West Garden Villa had been relatively prosperous and luxurious in Orris Hill 20 years ago. However, since it was already an old villa complex, it was not as luxurious and elegant as it used to be. In the past, Elaine felt that the West Garden Villa was already very good and luxurious. Moreover, she felt that she would never be able to move into a villa like this in her lifetime. Nevertheless, things were different now. When she thought of how she was going to move into the best villa at Thompson First very soon, Elaine felt a little dismissive of the West Garden Villa. Her old friend who lived at this villa complex was called Summer Gibson, and Elaine had met her many years ago. Summer came from a pretty good family background. Her husband made a lot of money in his early years, and after he passed away in an accident, he left Summer with a lot of money. After raising and sending her child abroad for further education, she would simply play Mahjong for fun to pass time every day. Summer was very rich, but she had very lousy hands and poor Mahjong skills. Therefore, she would always lose points to Elaine whenever they played Mahjong together. Elaine would always have more points and a better hand than her. Therefore, Elaine regarded Summer as her god of wealth and would definitely be there whenever Summer invited her over to play Mahjong. As soon as she rang Summer's doorbell, the door was opened almost immediately. At this time, a woman who was about the same age as Elaine quickly greeted her with a warm smile on her face. "Sister Elaine, you're here. Come on in." This middle-aged woman was none other than Summer. Elaine hurriedly greeted her before stepping through the door and saying with a smile, "Oh, Summer, I am sorry to keep you waiting for a long time." After that, both of them headed to the living room. At this time, the other two friends who had gathered to play Mahjong with the both of them were already sitting and waiting for Elaine at the Mahjong table. "Sister Elaine, you are finally here," another middle-aged woman said impatiently when she saw Elaine walking into the living room. "Come and sit down. We will start by playing 8 continuous laps today." As soon as Elaine and Summer sat down at the Mahjong table, the Mahjong game officially began. As Elaine rubbed the Mahjong tiles in her hand, she turned around and said, "Summer, you have already lived in this villa for quite a long time, right?" After touching a tile, Summer smiled before she replied, "Yes, this villa was bought for more than 10 years ago, mainly for investment purposes. After my child went abroad, I was living alone in the city, but the villa was too big for me. I could not help but feel very anxious living alone in such a huge villa." "Then, have you thought about renovating and refurbishing your villa?" Elaine asked, with an interested expression on her face. "Let me tell you, my daughter happens to own a renovation and refurbishment company, and she is also partnering with the Emgrand Group. If you are interested in renovating or refurbishing your villa, I can ask my daughter to give you a special price. When that time comes, she will surely turn your villa into a magnificent palace." "Sister Elaine, thank you for your kindness," Summer replied as she smiled slightly. After that, she sighed before she said, "However, I am already planning to sell this villa." "Sell it?" Elaine was very puzzled. "Why do you want to sell your villa? You are not short of money. I know that your husband left you 7 or 8 different houses, and you have also invested in several real estates yourself. Isn't it good for you to keep this villa for investment purposes?" Summer shook her head before she smiled and said, "Actually, I am going to the United States after a while. I am going to settle down there, and I am not going to come back to Orris Hill anymore." At this time, Elaine asked in surprise, "How are you planning to settle down in the United States?" Summer nodded slightly before she said, "Didn't I tell you that my son went abroad to study in the United States? He has not returned to the country after leaving for the United States. He is already married there, and my daughter-in-law is also pregnant now. My son does not intend to come back to Orris Hill anymore. Therefore, he wants to bring me over to live with him in the United States so that I can help him to look after his children in the future." One of the women sitting at the Mahjong table suddenly blurted out, "Oh, Summer, are you going to sell all of your houses and properties in Orris Hill then?" Summer replied, "I will just keep one of the smaller condominiums in the urban area. If there is an opportunity in the future, my family can come back to Orris Hill for a short vacation for a few days." Elaine could not help but feel a little sorry and disappointed when she heard Summer's words. She was not sorry that she was going to lose a good friend whom she could chat with and play Mahjong with. Instead, Elaine was upset because she felt that she would never be able to find another person like Summer who was rich and bad at playing Mahjong, but would never get upset and was always willing to lose money to her. At this time, outside the West Garden Villa, Christopher and Hannah had just parked their car at the entrance of the villa and were waiting for their real estate agent to arrive. Christopher intended to find a suitable house that would cost them less than $10 million. Therefore, he had contacted a real estate company and had asked for a real estate agent to help him find a villa that cost about $10 million. The average price of the houses in Orris Hill was a little more than $30,000, but a villa was naturally more expensive. It would be basically impossible for anyone to buy a brand new villa for $10 million. Therefore, they could only afford to come and look at this old villa. Hannah was very dissatisfied as she stared at the entrance of the West Garden Villa. "Christopher, don't you think that this villa complex is a little too old? Just look at the villas here. It looks even older than the old lady's villa. Why don't we look at some other villas in another area instead?" Christopher quickly replied, "There is no way we will be able to afford another villa elsewhere. Moreover, the first-grade houses at Thompson First are actually pretty good, but you refuse to buy a house there." Hannah became very annoyed as she replied, "That piece of trash Charlie owns a villa at Thompson First. I do not want to risk running into Jacob and Elaine there in the future. I am not going to buy an ordinary residential house or condominium apartment at Thompson First." Christopher replied, "Therefore, it would be more cost-effective for us to buy this kind of old villa. It has a very large and spacious area, and it will be very comfortable for our entire family to move in. It does not matter if the villa is a little older because we can always renovate it again." After that, Christopher continued speaking. "You have to consider the situation that we're in, Hannah. Both Harold and Wendy are both single. Each of them will already occupy one bedroom each. Both of us will take one bedroom, and that will already be 3 bedrooms. If Harold gets married in the future, he will definitely continue living with us. When he has a child, we have to make sure that the child has a room too. That is already 4 bedrooms." Christopher continued explaining, "And wouldn't Mom come to live with us in the future too? At that time, we will have to make sure that she has a bedroom to herself too. We would need 5 bedrooms in total. Thus, it would be most practical for us to buy a villa." Hannah asked angrily, "Why must your mother come and live with us? Why doesn't she go and live with Jacob instead?" Christopher shrugged as he said, "Since the old lady has already severed all ties with Jacob's family, do you think that Jacob will allow her to live with them?" Hannah was very dissatisfied, and she continued her argument. "No matter what, the old lady cannot come and live with us. I will not allow it. Anyway, the Wilson family is already done for, and we will not reap any further benefits from the old lady any longer. We should just send her to Jacob's house. It is none of our business if he allows her to live with him or not. We do not need to care about that old lady anymore." Christopher quickly replied, "Hannah, you might not know about this, but my mother bought a life insurance policy about 20 years ago. It is a financial insurance policy. The insurance payout after her death is at least $6 million. If you drive the old lady out of our house and ask her to live with Jacob instead, the $6 million will belong to Jacob after she dies." "More than $6 million?" Hannah's eyes lit up immediately as she asked in surprise, "She bought so much insurance?" "Yes." Christopher quickly explained, "This is the life insurance that my dad bought for her when he was still alive in order to leave a way out for the future generations." After that, Christopher also said, "Why don't you analyze and do the calculations yourself? How many more years could my mother possibly live when she is already so old? I think that she can only live for another 3 to 5 years at most. Let's just let her live with us for another 3 to 5 years. After her death, we will be able to get our hands on the $6 million life insurance. Don't you think that it is very worth it?" "Yes, it is worth it," Hannah replied as she rubbed her hands excitedly. After that, she said, "We have to take good care of your mother now. We should not allow Jacob and his family to lay their hands on your mother's life insurance." Christopher nodded as he smiled. "That is only natural. Don't worry. We will not split the $6 million with Jacob and his family when the time comes." Hannah hurriedly replied, "Not only will he not get a single penny from the $6 million, but we also have to make sure that Jacob pays half the amount of money for your mother's funeral and burial plot when she dies." At this time, Christopher subconsciously replied, "The old lady has already severed all ties with him. Do you think that he will willingly pay the money for her funeral and burial?" "Are you stupid?" Hannah could not help but burst out immediately. "The old lady might have already broken off all relations with him verbally, but it does not have any legal effect at all. When the old lady dies, we can go to court and sue Jacob if he refuses to pay half of the amount that we will have to spend on the old lady's funeral and burial. After all, before the law, Jacob is still legally the son of that old lady, and he has the obligation and responsibility to pay for her funeral and burial, too." Christopher beamed as he broke out into laughter. "Wife, you are right. At that time, we certainly have to ask Jacob to come out with half of the money for the expenses incurred. You are still the smarter one between the both of us, darling. Ha ha ha. Hannah was very proud of herself and grinned as she said, "The two fools, Jacob and Elaine, are always trying to play with us. But how could they possibly be our opponents?" As soon as her voice fell, a young real estate agent who was dressed in a small suit came over before asking politely, "Hello, are you Mr. and Mrs. Wilson?" "Yes, yes, yes," Christopher replied as he nodded hurriedly. "You must be the real estate agent from the Linux Real Estate Company, right?" "That's right," the young girl replied with a smile on her face. "Sir, madam, I have already made an appointment with the owner of the villa. She is already waiting for us. We can go in and take a look around the villa now." "Okay." Christopher nodded before he replied, "Let's go over and take a look then." As she led them toward the villa, the young girl took the opportunity to explain the situation. "I will tell you a little about the villa. The owner of the villa is a middle-aged lady. She wants to get rid of all her properties as soon as possible because she will be migrating to the United States soon. That is the reason why she is selling her villa at a slightly cheaper price as compared to the market price. This is definitely a very good deal." Christopher and Hannah could not help but smile to themselves when they heard the young girl's words. It was simply perfect if it was cheaper. If this villa was suitable, they could use the money that they saved from the purchase of the villa to renovate and refurbish the villa instead. Meanwhile, Elaine was still playing with Summer and her friends. As they were in the midst of the Mahjong game, the doorbell suddenly rang. Summer looked at her friends apologetically before she said, "I'm sorry, but please excuse me for a short while. I think the real estate agent is here with my potential buyer. I am going to go and open the door to invite them in now." Then Summer stood up before she walked toward the entrance and opened the front door. When Summer saw the real estate agent standing at the front door with a middle-aged couple, she knew that these were the potential buyers who had come here to take a look at her villa today. She smiled pleasantly at them before she said, "Hello, please come in." At this time, the real estate agent quickly spoke up. "Miss Gibson, let me introduce you to the potential buyers. This is Mr. Wilson and his wife, Miss Queen. This is the couple that I told you about over the phone, and they seem to be very interested in buying your villa." The middle-aged man smiled slightly before he took a step forward and said politely, "Hello, Miss Gibson. My name is Christopher Wilson, and I am very pleased to meet you." The visitors were none other than Christopher and his wife, Hannah. Summer smiled before she said, "Oh, please come in. Come in. I have not lived in this villa for many years, so please just make yourselves at home as you look around the villa." "Okay." Christopher nodded before he entered the villa with Hannah. After that, he began looking at the layout and interior design of the villa. At this time, Shella, the real estate agent, smiled before she said, "Mr. Wilson, the West Garden Villa is one of the first villa complexes that was developed in Orris Hill. The supporting facilities are all relatively complete, and it has very tight and good security. Therefore, your safety is guaranteed. The villa has an actual living area of 470 square meters, and this fully meets all of your previous requirements." The reason Christopher was looking forward to buying an old villa was because it would be relatively cheaper. A normal 470 square meters villa cost at least $20 million in Orris Hill. But the current market price of a villa in this villa complex generally costs only $13 or $14 million. Moreover, it seemed as though he would be able to bargain and cut down the price of the villa today. Therefore, Christopher asked Summer immediately, "Miss Gibson, how much do you intend to sell your villa for?" "Since I will be leaving for the United States soon, I am actually in a hurry to sell this villa. Therefore, I will sell my villa for a relatively cheaper price." Summer smiled slightly before she said, "Well, if both of you are really interested in buying my villa, I will sell it to you for $12 million. What do you think?" "What? Are you trying to steal or rob from us?" Hannah raised her voice as she blurted out her words in shock. "This is such an old villa, but you actually have the audacity to ask for $12 million?" Summer did not get angry and merely smiled as she said, "In this villa community, most of the listing prices for the villas here are above $13.5 million. Some people are placing their villa for sale for $14 million. Therefore, the price of $12 million that I have quoted to you is in fact a very, very cost-effective and special price." Right then, Elaine, who was sitting in the living room, heard the familiar voices from outside. She glanced outside out of curiosity and saw Hannah, who was very displeased and dissatisfied at this time. The man standing next to her was none other than Christopher, the eldest son of the Wilson family. Elaine really did not expect to see both of them here. After thinking about what Summer had just said, Elaine deduced that both of them were potential buyers who were interested to buy Summer's old villa. Wasn't the Wilson family about to go bankrupt? How could Christopher even afford to buy a villa at a time like this? At this time, Hannah had a very arrogant expression on her face as she said, "Miss Gibson, to be honest with you, only a fool would buy this old villa for $12 million. I heard that you were going to the United States soon, so I know that you will want to get rid of this villa as soon as you can. If you agree to sell me this villa for $8 million, we can complete the sales and transaction immediately today. After that, you can even pack your bags and leave for the United States tomorrow. Wouldn't that be the best of both worlds for you?" Hannah's main reason for lowering the price of the villa was because she knew that the other party was in a hurry to sell. In her opinion, since the other party was in a hurry to sell, she definitely had to take advantage of this opportunity to bargain and lower the price of the villa so that she could make a big profit for herself. She felt that if Summer was anxiously waiting to leave for the United States because she had a family member who was dying or in need of help, she would surely be able to pressure her into selling her villa for a lower price. However, Hannah did not know that Summer was actually very wealthy and had more than one house that she was waiting to sell. Therefore, she was not in need of money at all. Why would she possibly allow Hannah to take advantage of her and sell her the villa at a loss just because she was in a hurry to sell? Summer naturally knew that Hannah was up to no good. Therefore, she frowned before she replied in a disapproving tone. "Miss Queen, I admit that my villa is a little old, but I have already given you a very fair price for it. You will definitely not be able to find a lower price for a villa in this area than the price that I have just offered you. As for the price of $8 million that you have mentioned, I am afraid that is nothing but a fantasy." After that, Summer continued speaking. "Since it seems as though both of you are not really sincere, I don't think that we need to continue talking about this anymore." Christopher knew very well that his wife's counteroffer of $8 million was indeed very ridiculous. Why would anyone sell this villa for $8 million? In fact, if someone placed this villa for sale at $11 million, it would be sold within half an hour because it would indeed be a very good bargain for a villa like this. It would be very much cheaper than the market price. Therefore, Christopher hurriedly replied, "Miss Gibson, please do not be angry. My wife is not sensible, and she does not know that she is talking nonsense." Hannah glared at Christopher before she said, "I am not sensible? Christopher, have you forgotten who is in charge of this family? Have you forgotten who has always been the one making decisions for the family? I am telling you, I will not buy this villa for more than $8 million. Then, Hannah tried to wink at Christopher, almost as though she was trying to tell him that she had got this under her control. Hannah was confident that she would be able to take this woman down. Just then, Elaine walked over with a smile on her face as she said cheerfully, "Oh, brother-in-law and sister-in-law, you actually expect to buy this villa for only $8 million? Are you insane?" Truth be told, Hannah and Christopher would never have dreamt that they would run into Elaine here. Both of them really could not comprehend the situation. Why was Elaine here at the villa? Was she friends with Summer? Hannah was a little annoyed at this time. In fact, she had already planned to slaughter the price of the villa and insist on purchasing the villa for $8 million. If the other party disagreed with the price, she would just increase the price little by little until a maximum of $9 million. Hannah was confident that she would definitely be able to buy the villa for $9 million. However, she never would have expected Elaine to suddenly appear and attack them at this time. Besides, Elaine had always been very polite and respectful toward her. So why was she suddenly so courageous to even mock her in front of everyone else today? When did she become so courageous? Elaine had been bullied by Christopher and Hannah ever since she had married into the Wilson family. After being bullied for more than 20 years, Elaine naturally hated them to the core. Since she heard that the Wilson family was going to go bankrupt and lose everything that they had soon, Elaine had been looking for an opportunity to taunt and humiliate the both of them. Unexpectedly, the heavens had eyes, and she was given this golden opportunity to make fun of them today. This gave Elaine an opportunity to avenge the hatred that she had felt all these years. The expression on Hannah's face was very ugly after listening to Elaine's sarcastic remark. She turned her head and looked at Elaine before she said, "Elaine, what do you mean by that?" Elaine smiled before she said, "Oh, sister-in-law, do you really mean to say that you do not understand what I am saying? My friend's villa is worth more than $10 million, but you are actually trying to offer her only $8 million for it? Can you be even more shameless than this? I know that you might have become very poor recently, but this is not a valid reason for you to come out and try to take advantage of others." As Elaine spoke, she did not bother to conceal her feelings, or rather, she did not want to conceal it at all. Elaine did not care about their feelings whatsoever. Her husband, Jacob, had no place or status in the Wilson family, and that was the reason why she had been living under the pressure and control of this couple for so many years. She had been suffocated and filled with grievances throughout all these years. Since she finally had the opportunity to trample all over them, Elaine naturally wanted them to feel the bitterness she had tasted all this while. The expression on Hannah's face turned even uglier as she glared at Elaine and said, "Okay, Elaine, it seems as though you have become even more skillful after just a few days, right? You used to be so cowardly like a mouse who had just seen a cat when you saw me in the past. Now you actually dare to talk to me in this manner?" Hannah was also very angry at this time. In the past, Elaine was simply an inferior person who could not do anything or stand up to her at all. However, when Elaine saw that the Wilson family was about to go bankrupt, she immediately had the courage and guts to jump at her and taunt her. What a bitch! When Elaine heard Hannah mention the past, she quickly replied arrogantly, "Oh, sister-in-law, do you really think you can continue pressuring me just because the old lady favored you? Why don't you take a look in the mirror so you can see how poor you are now? You still dare to act tough in front of me?" Then, Elaine continued speaking. "To tell you the truth, I have already been unhappy and dissatisfied with you for a very long time, Hannah. Over the years, the old lady had always been very biased and impartial. She always favored you because you were her eldest daughter-in-law. Otherwise, how could I possibly have swallowed my pride, bowed down to you, and praised you when you were actually worth nothing at all? You are just a stinky woman who knows how to kneel down and suck up to an old lady. The Wilson family is already going bankrupt and you are still trying to act tough in front of me? Pfft! Why don't you take a piss and look at who you really are?" Hannah's face turned red with anger at this time. In the entire Wilson family, was she truly the only one who had been kneeling down and sucking up to Lady Wilson? When Elaine was trying to curry favor with Lady Wilson, she was more than willing to do anything that she could, and she worked even harder than anyone else to please the old lady. So how could Elaine say that about her when they were both obviously in the same boat? Christopher turned pale, and he quickly stepped forward to reprimand Elaine. "Elaine, stop trying to criticize and insult us. No matter how depressing our situation is, we are definitely better off than you. Why don't you take a look at your own life instead? Your husband is a piece of trash, your son-in-law is a piece of trash, and your whole family is simply pathetic." Elaine's eyes widened immediately, but she simply replied in disdain, "Oh, big brother, you are right. My husband is really nothing but a piece of trash, but what else can I do? All the men in the Wilson family are nothing but garbage. Don't you already know this in your own heart?" Christopher gritted his teeth in anger. "Good for you, Elaine. I was scolding your husband. But you actually dragged my husband and son into this?" At this time, Elaine did not give Christopher any chance to continue speaking at all. She simply placed her hands on her waist as she said arrogantly, "But don't you dare say that my precious son-in-law, Charlie, is a piece of trash. My precious son-in-law is really amazing. Moreover, I will also be able to move into my luxurious villa at Thompson First next month. Can you even afford a villa there? Do you have the ability to buy a villa there?" In truth, Elaine was not all that proud of Charlie. However, she was simply taking advantage of this opportunity to use Charlie to antagonize Christopher. It was really exhilarating. When Christopher heard Elaine's words, he felt very uncomfortable and distressed. Damn it! She was right. Even though Charlie was nothing but a piece of trash, he actually owned a luxurious villa at Thompson First. What about himself? He could only afford to buy a second-hand villa that was already 20 years old. Charlie could probably buy 10 of these villas with one of his villas at Thompson First. Elaine felt very happy and victorious when she saw the ugly and uncomfortable expression on Christopher's face. She was so excited that she felt as though she could perform a dance right here. After that, Elaine sighed before she continued attacking Christopher. "Oh, to be completely honest with you, I did think that Charlie was nothing but a pathetic piece of trash in the past. I used to look down on him and I really envied you and sister-in-law. Your daughter, Wendy, was engaged to the wealthy and powerful Gerald from the White family. Your family would have risen up the ranks in an instant if Wendy were to marry into the White family." Elaine sighed as she shook her head with regrets. "Well, who would have thought that Wendy would actually be dumped by Gerald? I guess Gerald is truly the scumbag of all scumbags. How could he be so heartless? He got Wendy pregnant, and then he dumped her without any hesitation at all. Who would do that to anyone?" Hannah and Christopher exchanged glances with one another. At this time, they were so angry and furious, they could kill anyone. Damn it, this lousy woman was absolutely overstepping her boundaries. At this time, Elaine continued speaking. "But still I envied you. Even though Gerald dumped Wendy, I heard that Wendy still got her hands on a new son-in-law for my brother and sister-in-law. I heard that your new son-in-law was Kenneth Wilson, the chairman of Modestway Group. He is so much wealthier and more powerful compared to Gerald." As she spoke about this, Elaine had a regretful expression on her face as she said, "However, even though Kenneth seems like the perfect man, there is still one big problem with him. He is a little too old. Brother-in-law, I think that Kenneth should be at least 2 to 3 years older than you. Am I right? Can I interview you and ask you a question? What does it feel like to have a son-in-law who is older than you?" Hannah could clearly hear the irony and sarcasm in Elaine's words, and the expression on her face was extremely ugly as she yelled, "Elaine, you'd better shut your mouth right now, otherwise I will tear your mouth apart today." "Hey," Elaine replied disdainfully. "Sister-in-law, I am simply speaking the truth. Why do you want me to shut my mouth? Why won't you let me continue speaking? Why do you want to tear my mouth apart?" As she spoke, Elaine snorted coldly before she said, "Let me tell you something, Hannah. Don't think that you can bully me just because you have a son-in-law who is older than you. Don't think that I don't know that Kenneth has already dumped Wendy a long time ago. Am I right? I also heard that Kenneth gave Wendy away to Jeffrey from the Weaver family. Ha 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 ha. Chairman Wilson is truly a very interesting person. Wendy is a person, not an item or a puppy. How could he just give her away to someone else so casually? That is the reason why I say my precious son-in-law, Charlie, is still the best. Even though he can be a little useless at times, at least he is very reliable, and he will never give up on our family just like that. Hannah was about to lose her cool and go crazy because of Elaine's ridicule. She gritted her teeth before she rushed directly at Elaine as she yelled hysterically, "Elaine, I am going to fight it out with you today!" When Elaine saw that Hannah had already raised her hands as she rushed toward her, she immediately took a few steps back as she said coldly, "Let me tell you something, Hannah. You cannot afford to offend me, so you'd better keep your hands to yourself." At this time, Hannah replied savagely, "I can't afford to offend a stinky woman like you. If I do not tear your mouth apart today, my last name will not be Queen." Elaine snorted before she retorted, "My precious son-in-law, Charlie, is very good at fighting. I believe you have not forgotten how he dealt with the bodyguards you hired, or how he taught your useless son, Harold, a lesson that he would never forget. Believe it or not, if you try and provoke me today, I will just call Charlie right now. I will ask him to come here and teach both of you a lesson immediately." Hannah shuddered as soon as she heard Elaine's words. She became very frustrated and felt as though all the anger and hatred she was feeling was already dissipating. To be honest, Charlie had truly left a very strong psychological shadow on her. She could not figure out why a pathetic piece of trash like Charlie, who was always bullied and insulted, could actually be so good at fighting. He was really insane and uncontrollable when he was beating people up. Christopher was also very afraid of Charlie. After all, he had personally witnessed what Charlie could do with his own 2 eyes, and he had almost peed out of fear the last time. When Elaine saw that both of them were silent as they were too afraid to say anything anymore, she knew that they were both afraid of Charlie. Therefore, she sneered before she said, "Oh, I sympathize with both of you, actually. The Wilson family is going down, and both Harold and Wendy are still single. I am also afraid that it will no longer be possible for Wendy to find a husband in Orowis Hill anymore. Ah, both of you are going to be so miserable and pitiful in the future." After that, Elaine continued speaking with a serious expression on her face. "Don't blame me for not giving you a kind reminder. I don't think you should even be buying a villa at this time. Why do you want to buy a villa anyway? You should just save up whatever money you can so that you will not have to starve or find a way to put food on your table in the future. You should just buy a cheap and small house in the suburbs and use your remaining money to start a small business instead." Christopher and Hannah were so angry that they were completely at a loss for words. Elaine continued, "Oh, right. I think that both of you should open a Mahjong hall. If that is the case, when Summer sells her villa, I will bring my friends over to your Mahjong hall to support your business. That way you and your family will not starve to death then. What do you think?" Christopher felt as though he was coming down with a heart attack. On the other hand, Hannah was ready to perish with Elaine. This was the first time they had ever felt so humiliated and insulted because of Elaine. This was the most ruthless and satirical remarks that anyone had ever said to them in their entire lives. What was even more hateful was the fact that they could not retaliate at all. How could they possibly retort her words? Their food, clothes, house, daughter, son-in-law, everything was inferior to that stinky woman, Elaine. As they thought about it, Christopher and his wife felt even more frustrated. They felt so ashamed and angry that they wanted to dig a hole so that they could hide immediately. Elaine was very satisfied at this time that she could even sing out loud. She really could not remember the last time she had felt so happy. She had finally avenged all of the hatred and dissatisfaction she had felt in the past. When Christopher realized that he would not be able to regain his face today, he simply said coldly, "Elaine, you will pay for your arrogance today, sooner or later." Elaine nodded as she sighed and said, "Yes, big brother. I really think that I will have to pay the price for my actions soon. I will have to move into the luxurious villa at Thompson First next month. I'm afraid that I will be lost every day because the villa is so big. How could I be able to live comfortably in the villa? The villa is so huge, I am afraid that I will feel very uncomfortable then. After that, Elaine sighed before she said, "Ah, when we move into the villa at Thompson First, we will be on a completely different level and status compared to you, big brother. We might not be able to see you so often in the future. Brother and sister-in-law, it seems as though you are right. There is a price that I will have to pay for my arrogance today." Christopher felt as though he was going to explode in anger. In order to preserve his own life, he gritted his teeth before he stomped his feet and cursed, "Damn it, we are not going to buy this villa anymore. Let's go." After that, Christopher took Hannah with him as they left the villa immediately. The real estate agent, who had been standing at the side, also followed awkwardly behind them. Even though she also despised these two customers after listening to Elaine's words, she had no choice but to follow after them, because the customer was always the king. When Summer saw both of them leaving, she could not help but sigh and say, "Sister Elaine, your relatives are truly strange. Did they treat me as a fool? She actually dared to ask to buy my villa for $8 million. Elaine smiled before she replied, "Well, they are going bankrupt soon. In fact, they are just a bunch of poor people with no money at all. I think that they may not be able to afford it even if you promise to sell the villa to them for $8 million. Summer nodded before she said, "That is truly disappointing. Let's ignore them and continue playing our Mahjong instead." Christopher and his wife Hannah began cursing in unison after they left the villa. The main reason why they did not dare to curse or swear in front of Elaine was simply because they were both afraid of her son-in-law, Charlie. If they got beaten up by Charlie, they would surely be on the losing end. The real estate agent followed quickly behind them, and after they were done scolding and cursing, she asked cautiously, "Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, do you want to take a look at other houses instead?" Hannah had a very ugly expression on her face as she glared at the girl and cursed, "Look? What are you looking at? Get out of my sight!" After saying that, Hannah grabbed Christopher as they walked out of the villa complex. The real estate agent could not help but shed tears of grievances at this time. However, since she had a weaker personality, she did not step forward to demand justice for herself. After leaving the villa, Hannah could not help but feel even more angry and frustrated. After that, she could not help but tell Christopher, "This Elaine is really good at showing off. Look at how she is acting just because she has some money now. How can she actually go around showing off that she is already going to move into the luxurious villa at Thompson First soon? If it were not for that piece of trash, Charlie, going around to deceive people, how could they possibly own a villa at Thompson First? I am so annoyed and frustrated right now." Christopher had a cold expression on his face as he agreed with Hannah's words. "That lousy woman is really too much." After that, Christopher sighed as he said helplessly, "Alas, we cannot afford to take any actions against her now. The Wilson family is going to crumble and fall soon. Anyone will be able to humiliate and trample all over us then." At this time, Hannah immediately asked, "Then, are we still going to buy a house then? If we do not buy a house, your mother is going to ask you to give her $8 million. "Buy! Of course we're going to buy a house," Christopher replied immediately. "However, we will not be buying the house now." Hannah hurriedly asked, "If so, when will we buy the house?" Christopher replied, "Doesn't that stinky woman Elaine have some money now? I think that we should try to scam the money out of her." "Scam her? How could we possibly scam her?" Hannah asked in surprise. Christopher had a sullen expression on his face as he said, "Doesn't she enjoy gambling? Then let's make a bet. First, we will use a petty profit to lure her into the game. After that, we will keep luring her to place a bigger bet, and we will then hire an experienced old man to deal with her. We will eventually be able to cheat all of her money out of her." At this time, Christopher sneered before he said, "It would be even better if we could get her to mortgage the villa at Thompson First to us. If that is the case, We will be able to turn our lives around immediately.